1,000 worlds passed them by, until a lone human signal pierced the void. Suddenly, the forgotten echoes of an ancient alien race stirred, and the galaxy braced for a reckoning it never saw coming. The crimson light of a dying star cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of Kelaru. Once, these towers had glittered with the reflected glory of 1,000 visiting dignitaries. Now, they stood as silent sentinels over a civilization slowly fading into myth. Elder Circle traced weathered fingers over ancient star charts, his translucent skin revealing the blue pathways of his veins like rivers on a forgotten map. 600 years had passed since the Alarians had made their fateful choice: neutrality over allegiance in the Great Conquered War. 600 years since the Galactic Conquered had erased them from official star charts, trade routes, and diplomatic registries as punishment for their refusal to take sides. "We fade, but we endure," Circle murmured, his seven-fingered hand hovering over the faded representation of their own sun. The words were more ritual than conviction now, a mantra repeated through generations of slow decline. Beneath the luminous crystal canopies of their last great biodome, younger Alarians tended carefully to the emerald vegetation that sustained their dwindling population. Their once mighty fleet, vessels of healing and education that had crisscrossed the galaxy, now lay dormant in orbital dockyards, preserved but powerless. The Alarians had once been the teachers of fledgling civilizations, the mediators of interstellar disputes, the healers who arrived unbidden when suffering threatened any world. No more. The galaxy had decided that neutrality was betrayal, and the price was oblivion. Circle's reminiscence was interrupted by Merida, a young scholar whose enthusiasm had not yet been tempered by centuries of isolation. "Elder," she said, her crystalline voice resonating with the harmonic tones characteristic of their species. "The memorial ceremony for the southern biodome begins soon. The council awaits your blessing." Circle nodded, carefully replacing the ancient charts in their protective casings. The southern biodome had finally failed last season, another piece of their world surrendering to entropy, another step toward extinction. "Tell them I shall join shortly," he replied. "I was just remembering when our ships brought healing to the Conquered's Third Fleet after the Battle of Solace Reach. They celebrated us then, before they decided our neutrality was more dangerous than our aid." Merida's luminescent eyes dimmed with sympathy. "The histories say we made the right choice. Elder, war would have destroyed us. And peace has merely delayed the inevitable," Circle responded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Come, let us honor what we have lost and preserve what remains." Together, they walked through corridors of living crystal, their steps echoing in chambers designed for thousands that now held mere hundreds. The great Hall of Communion, once thronged with representatives from 100 worlds, now served as a memorial garden where elders cataloged myths of their past glory. As they approached the council chambers, a sudden, unfamiliar vibration rippled through the crystalline architecture around them. Circle paused, his ancient senses still keen enough to recognize the impossible. "A signal," he whispered, "directed at our world." For the first time in over 6 centuries, someone beyond their dying star was reaching out to Kelaru. At the edge of charted space, the human scout ship Aurora's Dawn drifted through the darkness, its patched hull bearing the scars of a decade of frontier exploration. Inside the cramped communications bay, Specialist Lyra Chen adjusted her headset, her dark eyes widening as she stared at the readout before her. "Captain," she called over the ship's internal comm, "I'm picking up something strange." Captain Marcus Reeves appeared moments later, his weathered face bearing the lines of 20 years in deep space. "Define strange, Specialist." "It's... Sir, it looks like an ancient distress beacon, pre-Conquered encoding. I've run it through all our databases, and it doesn't match any recognized patterns except for a partial match with... Well, with legends, sir. Legends don't send distress signals. Specialist. What legends? Lyra hesitated. The Ilarians, sir. The Forgotten Healers. Reeves froze. Like all human explorers, he knew the stories. The ancient race that had guided fledgling civilizations before withdrawing from galactic politics, rather than choose sides in a devastating war. The race the conquered had officially forgotten as punishment for their neutrality. That's impossible, he said finally. The Concord erased all records of their homeworld's location centuries ago. They're just stories now. Yes, sir. But this signal. Lyra highlighted a section of the transmission. It's repeating just 3 words in what linguistic records suggest is ancient Ilarian. You are remembered. Reeves stared at the signal pattern, his mind racing. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 3 centuries ago, long after the Ilarians had been consigned to obscurity. The conquered had welcomed humans cautiously, impressed by their adaptability, but wary of their unpredictable nature. In 300 years, humanity had established itself as a rising power, resourceful, innovative, and stubbornly independent. And now, they had stumbled upon a ghost. Send a coded transmission to Earth Command, Reeves ordered after a long pause. Priority Alpha, then set course for the signal's origin. Minimum power, passive scans only. Sir? Lyra looked up, startled. Conquered regulations prohibit contact with non-sanctioned species. Reeves' expression hardened. Specialist. My grandmother was a historian who specialized in pre-conquered civilizations. The stories she told me about the Ilarians, if even half of them are true, we can't just ignore this signal. But sir, the consequences. Sometimes. Specialist. Reeves interrupted gently. Being human means remembering what others have chosen to forget. 96 hours later, far from the prying sensors of conquered outposts, the battered Terran freighter Hopesong slipped into orbit around Kellaroo. On its bridge, Captain Elena Hayes studied the readouts with growing disbelief. Confirm life signs, she ordered, her voice steady despite the historical weight of the moment. Lieutenant Marcus Lee nodded from the science station. Confirmed, Captain. Several thousand concentrated in crystalline structures near the equator. Energy signatures are weak but stable. The civilization appears to be in decline, but definitely Ilarian based on the historical records. Hayes turned to her communications officer. Open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies using the linguistic database provided by Earth Command. The bridge fell silent as the communications officer worked. Then, his voice filled with quiet awe, he spoke. Channel open, Captain. Hayes stood, smoothing the front of her uniform with a gesture that betrayed her nerves, despite years of command experience. This is Captain Elena Hayes of the Terran vessel Hopesong. We come in peace to the people of Kellaroo. We know what was done to you. We have come to stand with the forgotten. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. Then, suddenly, the view screen flickered to life, revealing the translucent, elegant features of an Ilarian elder, his eyes wide with shock and wary hope. I am High Elder Circle of Kellaroo, the alien said, his voice carrying the musical quality that human historians had only speculated about. Why would you risk everything to find us? Hayes smiled gently. Because where I come from, Elder Circle, we believe that no civilization should be forgotten simply for choosing peace. In the crystalline council hall of Kellaroo, chaos reigned. Elders who had known nothing but isolation for generations debated furiously as images of the Terran ship Hopesong rotated above their central dais. It must be a trap, Counselor Verna insisted, her fragile frame trembling with emotion. The conquered has found some new cruelty to inflict upon us. Perhaps they seek to finish what their silence began. And if it is not, Merida countered, her youthful voice cutting through the chamber. What if these humans truly come in friendship? We have been alone for so long. Must we reject the first hand extended to us in 6 centuries? High Elder Circle raised his hand for silence, the gesture commanding immediate respect despite the unprecedented situation. We must verify their intentions, he said firmly. Allow a small delegation to meet with them in the outer docking bay. If this is indeed a trap, we risk only a few. If it is genuine, his voice faltered momentarily. If it is genuine, then perhaps the universe has not forgotten us after all. The council fell silent, the weight of possibility almost too much to bear after centuries of resignation. While the Alarians debated, the crew of Hope Song prepared a diplomatic party. Captain Hayes selected her away team with care, Medical Officer Dr. Sandra Park, whose gentle demeanor might put the Alarians at ease. Security Chief Thomas Diaz, experienced enough to provide protection without appearing threatening, and Communications Specialist Aidan Cole, whose expertise in xenolinguistics would be invaluable. Remember, Hayes instructed as they prepared to board the shuttle. These people have been isolated for centuries. They've been erased from galactic memory as punishment for refusing to participate in war. Our goal is to establish trust, offer assistance, and show them that humanity stands with them. Captain, Dr. Park asked hesitantly, what will the Conquered do when they discover we've made contact? Hayes' expression hardened. That's a problem for tomorrow. Today, we right an ancient wrong. The shuttle descended through Kelaru's thin atmosphere, the crimson light of the dying star casting an otherworldly glow across its hull. As they approached the designated landing zone, a crystalline platform extending from one of the biodomes, Hayes felt the weight of history upon her shoulders. In the outer docking bay of the southern quadrant, Merida waited with Elder Circle and 2 other council members. Her hearts raced with nervous anticipation as the alien craft settled onto the platform with a gentle hiss. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a pneumatic sigh, a door slid open, and beings unlike any she had ever seen emerged. They were solid, not translucent like Alarians, with skin in various shades of brown and pink. They stood on 2 legs like Alarians, but their features were utterly foreign. Small, rounded ears, hair growing from their heads in different colors and textures, eyes that didn't glow with bioluminescence. They were dressed in matching uniforms of deep blue with silver insignia. The foremost figure, clearly female by Merida's assessment, stepped forward and raised an empty hand in what was obviously a gesture of peace. I am Captain Elena Hayes of Earth, she said, her words translated by a small device at her collar. We come with supplies, medical aid, and friendship to the people of Kelaru. Elder Circle stepped forward, his ancient frame seeming to gain strength in this historic moment. I am High Elder Circle. How did you find us when the galaxy has forgotten? Hayes smiled, the expression warming her face in a way that Merida found strangely reassuring despite its alienness. We never knew to forget you, Elder. Humanity joined the galactic community long after your absence. We found references to your people in ancient archives, a civilization of healers and teachers who chose neutrality over war. When our scout ship detected your beacon, we knew we had to come. And you risked the Conquered's wrath to do so? Circle asked, disbelief evident in his harmonics. Hayes' expression hardened subtly. Elder, my people have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. The erasure of your civilization was wrong. We refused to be complicit in that wrong through inaction. The silence that followed was profound. Then, with ceremonial dignity, Circle extended his 7-fingered hand toward the human captain. Then we welcome you to what remains of Kelaru, Captain Hayes. Perhaps you arrived just in time to witness our final days, or perhaps to prevent them. On the Conclave flagship Unity's Spear, Admiral Traxel received the report with cold fury, his insectoid mandibles clicking rapidly, a sign of agitation his subordinates had learned to fear. "Verify this," he commanded, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the holographic display before him. "Human vessels in the Forbidden Sector." "Confirmed, Admiral." His intelligence officer responded stiffly. "The Terran freighter Hopesong, and at least 2 smaller support vessels. They've established orbit around XN 7391. "Not XN 7391, Traxel corrected sharply. "Kelaru, the Ilarian homeworld." A shocked silence fell over the bridge. Few officers of the current generation even recognized the name, evidence of how thoroughly the Conquered had erased the Ilarians from collective memory. "How did they find it?" Traxel demanded. "The coordinates were purged from all databases centuries ago." "Unknown, Admiral, but humans have always been resourceful." Traxel paced the command deck, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. "The Senate must be informed immediately. Prepare a battle group. No rogue species defies the Concord in our space. Recall the Terrans, or we will recall them ourselves, with fire." As the officer hurried to comply, Traxel turned to gaze out at the stars. Humanity had been a problematic addition to the Conquered from the beginning. Too curious, too independent, too willing to question traditions that had maintained order for millennia. That they would discover and contact the Ilarians was an affront that could not stand. Some lessons had to be taught with overwhelming force. Days passed on Kelaru as the Terran crew established a base of operations in one of the refurbished outer domes. Medical supplies, water purifiers, and energy cells were distributed to grateful Ilarians. Dr. Park worked tirelessly alongside Ilarian healers, adapting human medical techniques to Ilarian physiology. Engineering teams began repairs on critical infrastructure that had deteriorated over centuries of isolation. Mirda found herself assigned as liaison to the human visitors, a role that brought her into daily contact with Captain Hayes. Despite their physical differences, she discovered a kindred spirit in the human commander. Both were driven by a deep sense of justice and a belief that compassion was strength, not weakness. "Your people risked everything to help mine," Mirda said one evening as they watched sunset paint the crystal spires in deepening shades of crimson. "Why?" Hayes considered the question carefully. "Humanity has its own dark history. Murder, wars, genocides, cruelty beyond imagining. But we also have a capacity for extraordinary compassion. When we learned about the Ilarians, about how you were punished simply for refusing to choose sides in someone else's war, many of us felt that your erasure represented everything we should stand against. Even knowing the Conquered might punish you as they punished us?" Hayes smiled grimly. "Especially then. If standing with the helpless is a crime, we accept the charge." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Hopesong. Hayes' face grew grave as she listened to the report. "A Conquered battle group has been detected approaching this sector," she informed Mirda, once the call ended. "At least 7 capital ships, including Unity's Spear. Admiral Traxel commands." Mirda's luminescent eyes dimmed with fear. "Then they know you have found us." "Yes, and they've issued an ultimatum. We must depart within 48 hours, or face the full consequences of our transgression." "You must go," Mirda said urgently. "You have shown us kindness. We cannot ask you to die for us. We have endured isolation for centuries. We will endure it again." Hayes shook her head, her determination evident in every line of her face. "No, Mirda. We didn't come all this way to abandon you at the first sign of trouble. Humanity stands with the Ilarians, now and always." Word of the Conquered ultimatum spread quickly through Kelaru. The council convened an emergency session, with Captain Hayes invited to attend, an unprecedented honor that reflected the gravity of the situation. "If you stay, they will destroy you." Elder Circle stated bluntly, as the council members murmured in fearful agreement. Our civilization has already been sentenced to a slow death. We cannot bear the guilt of your swift one. Hayes stood before the council, her posture straight and confident, despite the weight of their concern. With respect, Elder, we've already called for reinforcements from the Terran fleet. The Hope Song won't face the Conquered alone. Even so, Councillor Verna interjected, you cannot hope to match the firepower of a full Conquered battle group. Our neutrality doomed us to isolation. Your intervention will doom you to destruction. Perhaps, Hayes acknowledged. Or perhaps this is the moment when the galaxy must decide whether might alone determines right. Mirda watched the debate unfold, her young mind wrestling with conflicting emotions. The Alarians had chosen pacifism for generations, refusing to fight even in their own defense. Yet now, these humans stood ready to sacrifice themselves for a civilization they had only just met. We abandoned ourselves when we refused to fight, she whispered, not realizing she had spoken aloud until heads turned toward her. Embarrassed but determined, she continued more forcefully. For 6 centuries, we have preserved our physical existence while allowing our spirit to wither. These humans remind us of who we once were, healers and teachers. Yes, but also beings of principle who stood firm against injustice. Elder Circle regarded her with sad wisdom. And would you have us abandon those principles now, young one? Would you have us embrace violence after all this time? I would have us embrace courage, Mirda replied, her voice gaining strength. There is a difference between violence and defense, between aggression and protection. If we stand with the humans now, we stand not for war, but for our right to exist without erasure. A murmur ran through the council, some supportive, others scandalized. Hayes watched with respect as this young Ilarian challenged centuries of resignation with nothing but the force of her conviction. Finally, Elder Circle raised his hand for silence. Captain Hayes, what would you have us do? Help us prepare defenses, she replied without hesitation. Not to attack, but to protect. Your knowledge of this system, your ancient technologies, they might give us an advantage the Concord doesn't expect. The council chamber fell silent as the Ilarians faced a choice that would define their future, if they had one. Above Kelaru, the Conquered fleet arrived with overwhelming force. 7 capital ships, 20 support vessels, and countless fighters formed a blockade around the planet. On the bridge of Unity's Spear, Admiral Traxel surveyed the tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Terran vessel remains in orbit, his tactical officer reported, and sensors detect 3 additional human ships entering the system. Traxel's mandibles clicked in irritation. Reinforcements? They dare to escalate this situation? Small vessels only. Admiral. The Horizon's Edge appears to be their flagship, a converted exploration cruiser, not a true warship. The Admiral studied the approaching human ships with contempt. They were outclassed and outgunned, a ragtag fleet against the might of the Conquered. Yet something about their formation troubled him. They moved with precision, interlocking their shield perimeters in a defensive pattern that maximized coverage with minimal resources. These humans were prepared for battle, despite the hopelessness of their position. Open a channel to their flagship, he ordered. Moments later, the stern face of a human female appeared on his view screen, Captain Amara Chen of the Horizon's Edge. Admiral Traxel, she acknowledged with cold formality. The Terran Defense Force recognizes your presence in this system. Captain Chen, he responded, emphasizing her lesser rank. You and your vessels are in violation of Concord Directive 5591, the prohibition against contact with non-sanctioned civilizations. You will depart immediately or face the consequences. Chen's expression remained impassive. With respect, Admiral, we do not recognize the authority of a directive that sentences an entire species to erasure for the crime of neutrality. Traxell's patience thinned. This is not a negotiation, Captain. You have 24 hours to depart this system, or we will remove you by force. Then we stand here, Chen replied simply, and terminated the connection. Traxell stared at the blank screen, his anger giving way to a flicker of unease. Something in the human's calm defiance suggested she knew something he did not. He turned to his intelligence officer. Scan the Ilarian surface. What have the humans been doing down there? On the surface of Kilaru, preparations continued at a feverish pace. Under Merida's guidance, ancient Ilarian energy nodes were unearthed from storage vaults and positioned strategically around the remaining biodomes. These crystalline devices, once used to heal planetary ecosystems damaged by natural disasters, were being repurposed as shield generators under the direction of Terran engineers. Will this work? Merida asked Lieutenant Lee, who was calibrating the output of a particularly large node. In theory, he replied. His attention focused on the delicate adjustments. These crystals can channel and amplify energy in ways our technology can't match. If we're right, they'll create a diffusion field that will weaken conquered weapon impacts by up to 60%. And if you're wrong? Lee glanced up with a grim smile. Then we'll have died for something worth dying for. Elsewhere on the planet, Ilarian scholars worked alongside human tacticians to chart the complex gravitational eddies unique to the Kilaru system, knowledge that had been erased from conquered records but preserved in Ilarian archives. This information would give the human ships a navigational advantage if combat erupted. In a secure communications center, Agent Ryland Archer, a cyber espionage specialist from Earth Intelligence, worked with a team to monitor conquered transmissions. They're debating whether to strike immediately, she reported to Captain Hayes over a secure channel. Some conquered lords are arguing for immediate action, fearing our presence could embolden other races they've similarly marginalized. And the others? Hayes asked. They're warning that unleashing devastation on Kilaru could backfire, make the Concord look cruel rather than just... For now, they voted to wait one more day. Good, Hayes responded. That gives us time to finish preparations. What about the other matter? Archer's voice lowered. I've detected some anomalies in the Concord transmissions. Certain frequencies that don't match standard protocols. There's something strange about this whole situation. Why the Concord reacted so extremely to contact with a civilization they themselves claim is irrelevant. Keep digging, Hayes ordered. If there's more to this story than we know, we need to find it before the shooting starts. Night fell over Kilaru, the darkness broken only by the faint glow of Ilarian bioluminescence and the distant lights of human ships in orbit. In the council chamber, Merida found Elder Circle standing alone, gazing up at the stars through the crystal dome. You should rest, Elder, she said gently. Tomorrow may bring great challenges. Circle acknowledged her with a slight nod but kept his gaze fixed upward. In all my centuries, I never imagined I would see our sky filled with ships again, especially not ships prepared to defend us. The humans have shown great courage, Merida agreed. As have you, young one. Circle turned to face her, his ancient eyes glowing with quiet pride. Your words in council today, they reminded me of who we were before fear of destruction led us to choose neutrality. Merida looked down, suddenly uncertain. I spoke from emotion, not wisdom. Perhaps I was wrong to challenge our traditions of pacifism. Perhaps, Circle agreed, surprising her. Or perhaps traditions must sometimes be questioned if they lead us to accept injustice as inevitable. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Whatever comes tomorrow, you have already helped restore something precious to our people. Hope. As dawn broke over Kilaru, the conquered fleet shifted into attack formation. On the bridge of Unity's Spear, Admiral Traxell received the final authorization from the conquered Senate. The human interlopers were to be removed by any means necessary. Last warning to the human vessels, he ordered his communications officer. Then prepare to fire. The ultimatum was delivered with cold precision. Terran vessels, this is your final opportunity to withdraw from the Kelaru system. Failure to comply within 15 minutes will be met with lethal force. On the bridge of Horizon's Edge, Captain Chen exchanged glances with Captain Hayes, who had returned to orbit to coordinate the defense. "Well, Elena," Chen asked quietly, "is it worth it?" Hayes looked at the tactical display showing the overwhelming conquered force arrayed against them. Then, at the fragile crystal structures of Kelaru below. "You know it is, Amara," she replied. "Send our response." Chen nodded to her communications officer, who opened a channel to Unity's spear. "Admiral Traxel, this is Captain Chen. Our answer is unchanged. We stand with Kelaru." For 15 tense minutes, silence reigned across both fleets. Then, without further warning, a blinding beam of energy lanced out from a conquered cruiser, scorching the lower atmosphere of Kelaru and burying an Ilarian shield generator beneath a mountain ridge. The battle had begun. On the surface, Ilarians scrambled to reroute power as emergency systems blared warnings throughout their biodomes. Merida ran through a shaking corridor, directing technicians to secondary nodes as the ground trembled beneath them. "Status of the Northern Shield," she called to a human engineer monitoring the energy grid. "Holding at 40%, he replied, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. "But they're targeting the nodes systematically. They know exactly what we're doing." Above the planet, the human ships responded with disciplined precision. Hopesong and 2 smaller escorts concentrated fire on the Concorde cruiser that had launched the first strike, targeting its weapons array while carefully avoiding its life support systems. The cruiser's forward cannons exploded in silent bursts of flame, temporarily neutralizing its offensive capability without destroying the vessel. "Surgical strikes only," Hayes ordered as targeting solutions appeared on her tactical display. "We defend, we disable, but we don't destroy unless absolutely necessary." The conquered fleet, however, had no such restraints. Plasma volleys rained down on the human ships and the planet's surface, the sky ablaze with energy weapons and the flash of shields struggling to hold. On Unity's spear, Admiral Traxel watched with growing frustration as the human vessels executed evasive maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible in Kelaru's complex gravitational field. "They're using Ilarian navigational data," he realized aloud. "Data that was supposed to have been purged centuries ago." "Admiral," his tactical officer reported urgently, "the Horizon's Edge is coordinating their defense with surface installations. Our standard targeting protocols are proving ineffective against their shield configuration." Traxel's compound eyes narrowed. This was supposed to have been a simple show of force, a reminder of conquered supremacy over upstart species. Instead, the humans and Ilarians together were offering unexpectedly effective resistance. "Enough games," he hissed. "Target the Terran flagship with the main cannon. Full power." The massive energy weapon at Unity's spear's heart began to charge, drawing power from the ship's core. On Horizon's Edge, alarms blared as sensors detected the power buildup. "They're targeting us with something big," Lieutenant Lee reported, his voice steady despite the implications. "Energy readings are off the charts." Captain Hayes nodded grimly. "Divert all available power to forward shields. Prepare for impact." The bridge crew worked frantically as the massive conquered weapon reached full charge. Then, with devastating force, a brilliant beam of concentrated energy lanced across space and slammed into Horizon's Edge's shields. The human ship shuddered violently. Conduits exploded in showers of sparks. Crew members were thrown from their stations as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the massive impact. For a terrible moment, the bridge was plunged into darkness as primary systems failed. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the faces of the crew as they waited in silence, wondering if their shields had collapsed completely. On Unity's spear, a cheer went up as the Terran flagship disappeared in the blinding flash of the main cannon's discharge. "Direct hit," the tactical officer reported with satisfaction. "The Terran vessel appears to be—" He stopped abruptly, staring at his readouts in disbelief. "Impossible!" As the energy dissipated, Horizon's Edge became visible once more. Its hull was scorched and damaged in multiple sections, but the ship remained intact, and its running lights were coming back online. "How?" Traxel demanded, mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. "No shield should have withstood that discharge." Before anyone could respond, the tactical officer cried out in alarm. "Admiral, the Terran ship is powering weapons!" Horizon's Edge's shields flared back to life, glowing with an unexpected iridescence that suggested Ilarian technology had been integrated into its defense systems. Then, with precision that belied its damaged state, it unleashed a devastating volley directly at Unity's spear's exposed weapons array. The conquered flagship rocked under the impact as its main cannon exploded, sending cascading failures through its offensive systems. Warning klaxons blared across its decks as secondary explosions rippled through weapons control centers. Admiral Traxel stared in disbelief as his tactical display showed the damage reports. His flagship, the pride of the Concord fleet, had been effectively neutralized as a combat vessel by a supposedly inferior human ship. And that was only the beginning. Across the battlefield, the remaining human vessels pressed their sudden advantage, targeting the propulsion and weapon systems of the Concord fleet with uncanny accuracy. Smaller Terran fighters, launched from Horizon's Edge's bay, darted between capital ships, creating confusion and drawing fire away from critical targets. On the surface of Kilaru, Ilarians watched in awe as the night sky blazed with combat. Merida stood beside Elder Circle at the apex of the Council Dome, their faces illuminated by distant explosions. "They're winning," she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "The humans are actually winning." Circle said nothing, his ancient eyes reflecting the battle above. 600 years of resignation were being undone in a single night by a species that had refused to accept injustice as inevitable. In orbit, the conquered line finally broke. With Unity's spear crippled and 3 other capital ships severely damaged, Admiral Traxel faced the unthinkable: defeat at the hands of a vastly outnumbered force. "Regroup at coordinates Delta 9, he ordered, his voice hollow with shock. "We withdraw to assess and repair." As the conquered fleet limped away from Kilaru, pursued at a distance by human fighters, ensuring they left the system entirely, an eerie silence fell across the battlefield. The thunderous roar of combat faded, leaving only the gentle hum of damaged ships and the occasional burst of static from overloaded communication systems. On Horizon's Edge, Captain Hayes surveyed her wounded bridge with grim satisfaction. The cost had been high: 16 crew dead, dozens injured, critical systems barely functioning. But they had held the line. "Status report," she requested, her voice hoarse from shouting orders through the chaos of battle. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, her executive officer reported, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "Engineering reports the main reactor is stable, but operating at 60% capacity. Weapon systems functional but depleted. Communications limited to short range only." Hayes nodded, absorbing the information. "And the planet?" "Surface installations took heavy damage, but the main biodomes held casualties. Appear to be light, all things considered." "Captain," the communications officer interrupted, "I'm receiving a transmission from the surface. It's Elder Circle." The weathered face of the Ilarian leader appeared on the main view screen, his expression one of mingled grief and gratitude. "Captain Hayes," he began formally, "the Council of Kilaru extends its profound thanks for your defense of our world. We had forgotten what it meant to have allies willing to stand with us, even at great cost." Hayes managed a tired smile. The cost would have been greater had we stood aside. Elder, how fare your people? We rebuild, as we have always done. But this time, we do not rebuild alone. Circle's eyes seemed to brighten. If you can spare them, we would welcome your engineers and medical personnel to assist with repairs. Of course, Hayes agreed immediately. We'll send what help we can. As the transmission ended, Captain Chen approached Hayes' command chair. They'll be back, you know, she said quietly. The Conquered won't accept this defeat. Hayes nodded solemnly. I know, but we've bought time. Time for Earth to send real reinforcements. Time for the Ilarians to strengthen their defenses. Time for the truth to spread. The truth. Hayes' expression hardened. That the Concord's policy of erasure is unjust, and that humanity will not stand for it. Today, we showed the galaxy that even the mighty Concord can be challenged when their actions violate basic decency. Chen smiled thinly. One battle doesn't win a war, Elena. No, Hayes agreed, but it can change the minds that eventually end one. In the days that followed, human crews worked alongside Ilarians to repair the damage from the battle. Medical teams treated the wounded. Engineers reinforced damaged structures, and salvage crews recovered valuable technology from debris in orbit. Mirda found herself working closely with Agent Ryland Archer, the Terran intelligence specialist whose quiet competence masked a brilliant analytical mind. Together, they pored over Conquered transmissions intercepted during the battle, searching for patterns and anomalies. There's something strange about these security protocols, Archer muttered, highlighting a section of encrypted data. They're using a classification level that exceeds standard Conquered military communications. Mirda leaned closer, her luminescent eyes casting a soft glow over the display. Could it be diplomatic traffic? Our history suggests the Conquered Senate sometimes used higher encryption for political matters than for military ones. Archer's eyebrows rose in surprise. That actually makes sense. Let me try a different decryption algorithm. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface, applying a series of cryptographic keys based on Mirda's insight. Gradually, the scrambled data began to resolve into legible text. "Oh my God," Archer breathed as the full message appeared. "This isn't from the current Conquered leadership at all. It's from something called the Veiled Council, some kind of shadow faction within the Conquered." Mirda frowned, the name triggering a distant memory. Our oldest archives mention rumors of a secret cabal that wielded influence in the early Conquered, those who believed that complete unity required the suppression of all dissent. Well, it seems they're still active, Archer replied grimly. And, according to this, they were the ones who pushed for your people's erasure in the first place, and they've continued working to ensure anyone who tries to help the Ilarians is discredited or worse. The implications were staggering. For 600 years, the Ilarians had believed they were being punished by the collective will of the galaxy. Now, it appeared their exile had been engineered by a hidden faction working for its own purposes. "We need to inform Captain Hayes immediately," Mirda said, her voice tight with urgency. "And Elder Circle, this changes everything." In the Ilarian Council Hall, Captain Hayes stood before the assembled elders, her uniform freshly pressed despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. Agent Archer and Mirda flanked her, prepared to present their findings. "Honored Council," Hayes began, "we've discovered information that sheds new light on your people's exile, and on the Conquered's extreme response to our presence here." Elder Circle gestured for her to continue, his ancient face grave. "Agent Archer has decrypted communications that reveal the existence of a secret faction within the Conquered, the Veiled Council. This group appears to have orchestrated your civilization's erasure centuries ago, and has continued to manipulate Conquered policy to maintain your isolation." Murmurs of shock and disbelief rippled through the council chamber as Archer stepped forward to display the evidence. meeting minutes, assassination orders, and what appeared to be a systematic campaign to suppress any mention of the Ilarians across hundreds of worlds. "But why?" Counselor Verna demanded, her frail voice rising with emotion. "Why would they invest such effort in erasing a peaceful people who chose only neutrality?" "Because your neutrality threatened their vision of absolute control," Merida answered, stepping forward. "The Veiled Council doesn't just want obedience. They want complete, ideological conformity. A civilization that refused to choose sides, that insisted on maintaining its own moral compass, rather than blindly following conquered dictates. That was more dangerous to them than any military threat." Hayes nodded in agreement. "And now they fear that humanity might follow your example, might challenge the idea that the Concord's authority is absolute and unquestionable." Elder Circle's eyes dimmed as he absorbed this revelation. 600 years of isolation, because we dared to think for ourselves. "There's more," Archer added grimly. "We've intercepted transmissions, suggesting the Veiled Council is planning sabotage operations against sympathetic systems, worlds that might support Terran-Ilarian cooperation. They're desperate to prevent this alliance from inspiring others." The council chamber fell silent as the Ilarians confronted the full scope of the conspiracy that had shaped their fate for centuries. Then, unexpectedly, Elder Circle rose to his feet with a vigor that belied his age. "Then we must expose them," he declared, his voice ringing with newfound resolve. "Not with weapons, but with truth, the most powerful force in any civilization." Mirda felt a surge of pride at the elder's words. This was the spirit of her people, not merely pacifistic, but principled and courageous in their own way. "How?" Counselor Verna asked, practical despite her shock. "The Concord controls all major communications networks. They would simply block any transmission we attempt." Hayes exchanged glances with Archer before responding. "Not if we deliver the message from inside their own systems." Over the next 48 hours, a daring plan took shape. Agent Archer, working with Ilarian data specialists, identified a fortified Concord outpost on the moon Araxay that served as a major communications hub for the sector. More importantly, intelligence suggested it was also a headquarters for Veiled Council operations. "The outpost is heavily defended," Archer explained, as she briefed the mission team aboard the stealth frigate Silent Vigil. "But their security focuses on conventional military threats. They're not expecting a small infiltration team." Captain Hayes studied the holographic model of the facility. "And you're certain this will work?" "The plan is solid," Archer confirmed. "We infiltrate the facility using Ilarian stealth technology, combined with our own electronic countermeasures. Once inside, we access their central database, retrieve additional evidence of Veiled Council activities, and then use their own transmission array to broadcast the truth galaxy-wide." "And the risks?" Hayes pressed. Archer didn't flinch. "Extremely high. If we're detected, the Conquered will label this an act of war, regardless of our justification." Hayes nodded soberly. "Then we need volunteers only. No one ordered into this mission." To her surprise, Merida stepped forward. "I will go," the young Ilarian declared firmly. "My knowledge of ancient Conquered protocols may prove useful in bypassing their security systems." "This isn't your fight, Merida," Hayes began, but the Ilarian cut her off with unexpected passion. "It has been our fight for 600 years. Captain, we simply didn't know who our true enemy was." Her luminescent eyes glowed with determination. "Besides, if we are to reclaim our place in the galaxy, we must do more than hide behind human shields. We must stand beside you as equals." Elder Circle, who had been observing quietly, nodded in approval. "Merida speaks for many of us. Captain, the time for mere survival is past. Now we must live with purpose once more." After careful consideration, the final team was assembled. Agent Ryland Archer would lead, with Murda providing cultural and technical expertise. 2 Terran Special Operations officers would provide security, while a communications specialist would handle the broadcast itself. 96 hours after the Battle of Kelaru, Silent Vigil slipped away from the planet, its experimental cloaking system rendering it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. On its bridge, Captain Hayes watched the small vessel disappear into the darkness with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Godspeed," she whispered, though only she could hear the words. The approach to Araxay was tense but uneventful. Silent Vigil's stealth systems functioned perfectly, allowing it to settle into orbit around the barren moon without triggering the Concord's perimeter alarms. 2 shuttlecraft, similarly cloaked, detached from the frigate and descended toward the outpost's southern quadrant, where security was thinnest. Inside the lead shuttle, Myrda tried to control her nervous energy as the craft touched down silently on the moon's dusty surface, 2 kilometers from the facility's outer perimeter. "Remember," Archer instructed as they donned their environmental suits, "we move exactly as planned. 7 minutes to reach the access point, 12 minutes to infiltrate the central database, 3 minutes to initiate the broadcast, then 7 minutes back to the shuttles. No deviations unless absolutely necessary." The team acknowledged the timeline and moved out across the lunar landscape, their suits' chameleonic surfaces blending with the terrain. Ahead loomed the Concord outpost, a fortress of dark metal and glowing force fields, its comma rays stretching toward the stars like accusing fingers. They reached the outer perimeter without incident, using a combination of Ilarian crystal technology and Terran electronic countermeasures to create a temporary blind spot in the sensor grid. Archer led them through the gap to a maintenance airlock that, according to their intelligence, was rarely monitored. Inside, the facility was a maze of utilitarian corridors and security checkpoints. The team moved in perfect synchronization, freezing in place whenever automated patrols passed by, using specialized devices to create momentary failures in surveillance systems. "The central data core should be 2 levels down," Archer whispered as they reached a restricted access elevator. "Myrda, can you bypass the security?" The Ilarian nodded, placing a crystalline device against the elevator's control panel. The crystal glowed softly as it interfaced with the Concord technology, transmitting security codes that had been preserved in ancient Ilarian archives, but long forgotten by the Concord itself. With a soft chime, the elevator activated, its doors sliding open to admit them. "Sometimes the oldest keys open the newest locks," Myrda observed with quiet satisfaction. The data core was a cathedral of information, towering servers humming with the secrets of the Concord, bathed in the cold blue light of holographic monitoring stations. 2 technicians monitored the systems, unaware of the intruders until it was too late. The Terran security officers moved with silent efficiency, using non-lethal stun weapons to render them unconscious. "We have 8 minutes remaining," Archer announced, plugging a specialized device into the main console. "Myrda, help me navigate their file structure. We're looking for anything related to the Veiled Council, particularly their current operations." Working together, human and Ilarian sifted through the vast database with practiced speed. What they found exceeded their wildest expectations, not merely evidence of the conspiracy against the Ilarians, but a vast network of manipulation stretching across the entire Concord. The Veiled Council had influenced elections, assassinated reformers, fabricated threats, and suppressed discoveries that might have brought different species closer together. "This is monstrous," Myrda whispered, as the scope of the deception became clear. "They've been shaping the entire galaxy according to their vision." "Not for much longer," Archer replied grimly, copying the most damning evidence to their broadcast device. "Time to let the truth shine." With practiced efficiency, the communications specialist connected their device to the outpost's transmission array. This was the most dangerous moment, They would have to disable security protocols that would immediately alert Concord authorities to the unauthorized broadcast. "Ready?" Archer asked, her finger hovering over the activation control. Murda nodded, a sense of historic weight settling on her shoulders. "For 600 years of silence," she said softly. Archer pressed the control. Across thousands of worlds, communication systems suddenly interrupted their normal functions. On starships and space stations, in governmental chambers and public squares, on personal devices and massive view screens. The same transmission appeared, a carefully edited compilation of the evidence they had discovered. Meeting minutes detailing the original conspiracy against the Ilarians. Assassination orders targeting officials who questioned the policy of erasure. Strategic plans to isolate and discredit any civilization that showed sympathy for forgotten peoples. Internal communications revealing the Veiled Council's contempt for the very species they claimed to protect through their actions. And finally, a simple message. The truth can no longer be veiled. The Ilarians were erased not because they threatened the conquered, but because they dared to maintain their independence of thought. Now humanity stands with them, and we invite all peoples who value justice to join us in rejecting the politics of erasure and embracing a galaxy where diversity of thought is celebrated, not punished. The broadcast lasted precisely 90 seconds, long enough to convey the essential information, but brief enough that Concord censors couldn't block it before most citizens had seen at least part of the message. In the data core, alarms began to blare as the outpost's security systems finally detected the intrusion. "Time to go," Archer announced calmly. "Move exactly as planned." The team withdrew from the facility with the same precision that had marked their entry, though now they moved with greater urgency as security forces mobilized to intercept them. A brief firefight erupted near the outer perimeter, but the Terran officers' suppressive fire allowed the team to reach the waiting shuttles unharmed. As they lifted off from Araxe's surface, Murda watched the conquered outpost receding below them, its ordered symmetry now disrupted by the chaos of security teams, searching for intruders who were already beyond their reach. "Do you think it will make a difference?" she asked Archer quietly. "One transmission against centuries of control?" The human intelligence officer smiled grimly. "Truth is like that crystal you used on the elevator. Sometimes the smallest key can unlock the largest door." The reaction to the broadcast was immediate and profound. Across conquered space, citizens who had never questioned the official narratives suddenly found themselves confronted with evidence of systematic deception. On dozens of worlds, populations that had been subjected to similar policies of marginalization recognized their own struggles in the Ilarian story. Protests erupted on core conquered worlds. Diplomatic alliances fractured as governments demanded explanations. Military vessels refused orders to move against Kelaru, their captains unwilling to enforce policies, now revealed as corrupt. On Unity's spear, Admiral Traxel watched in impotent fury as his authority crumbled. Half his fleet had received recall orders directly from the Senate, which was now in emergency session debating the Veiled Council revelations. The other half remained nominally under his command, but he could sense the hesitation in his officers' responses, the first deadly cracks in the edifice of absolute obedience. Meanwhile, on Kelaru, a new era was dawning. As news of the broadcast's impact spread, the Ilarian Council convened to discuss their sudden and unexpected return to galactic relevance. "We stand at a crossroads," Elder Circle addressed the assembled Ilarians, his voice stronger than it had been in decades. "For 6 centuries, we have preserved our knowledge and our values in isolation. Now, we have the opportunity to share them with the galaxy once more." "But how?" Counselor Verna asked. "We are still few, our resources limited. The conquered, even in disarray, remains powerful." "We do not stand alone," Circle reminded her, gesturing to Captain Hayes, who had been invited to address the council. "Humanity has shown us that courage, not numbers, determines destiny." Hayes stepped forward, her uniform now bearing a new insignia, a stylized representation of Earth and Kelaru orbiting a common center. "Elder Circle is right," she said firmly. "The broadcast has already inspired other civilizations to question conquered authority. Diplomatic channels that have been silent for generations are reopening. Earth has formally recognized Kelaru as a sovereign and equal partner." She paused, allowing her words to resonate through the crystal chamber. "My government has authorized me to propose the formation of a new interstellar body, a union of free peoples, dedicated to the principles of self-determination, mutual aid, and the free exchange of knowledge. The Ilarians, with their ancient wisdom and healing arts, would be founding members alongside Earth." A murmur of excitement rippled through the council chamber. Merda, seated near the front, felt a surge of emotion as she watched the faces of her people transform with hope. Real hope, not the thin comfort of mere survival that had sustained them for centuries. "We accept," Elder Circle declared without hesitation. His decision, meeting with approving nods from the other counselors. "The Ilarians will join this union and contribute all that we are to building a more just galaxy." In the weeks that followed, ships arrived from Earth bearing diplomats, scientists, and engineers eager to learn from Ilarian knowledge and to help rebuild their civilization. Other vessels came too, representatives from worlds that had suffered similar erasure, seeking alliance and solidarity in what was rapidly becoming a movement for galactic reform. The Concord, faced with widespread unrest and the defection of key member species, was forced to acknowledge the injustice done to the Ilarians. The Veiled Council was officially disbanded, its members facing prosecution for centuries of manipulation and crimes against countless peoples. A new era of cooperation began to emerge from the shadow of the old order. Ilarian healers, their skills preserved through centuries of isolation, once again traveled to worlds in need. Human innovation combined with Ilarian wisdom produced advancements that benefited all. The Union of Free Peoples grew steadily, offering an alternative to conquered membership that emphasized cooperation without demanding conformity. 1 year after the Battle of Kelaru, a ceremony was held on the planet's surface to commemorate the alliance that had changed the course of galactic history. Terran and Ilarian vessels co-patrolled the skies, their formations a visible symbol of the new partnership. On a platform beneath the crystal dome of the restored council hall, Captain Hayes, now Admiral Hayes, commander of the Union's Joint Defense Force, stood alongside Elder Circle and Merda, who had become her people's ambassador to Earth. Before assembled dignitaries from dozens of worlds, Elder Circle stepped forward carrying a healing crystal, one of the Ilarians' most sacred artifacts. With ceremonial dignity, he presented it to Hayes. "This crystal, which has healed countless wounds across the centuries, we give now to humanity, not as payment for your aid, but as a symbol of what our peoples can accomplish together. Where the conquered sought to divide, we shall unite. Where they enforced silence, we shall speak truth." Hayes accepted the crystal with reverence, its surface catching the light of Kelaru's crimson sun and transforming it into a spectrum of colors that danced across the assembled crowd. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I accept this gift and the responsibility it represents," she responded formally. "The union we are building will stand as testament to a simple truth, that in the vast silence of space, the promise of friendship echoes louder than any weapon." As applause filled the chamber, Merda gazed out at the gathered representatives of a dozen species, some familiar from ancient Ilarian records, others entirely new to her people. The galaxy was opening before them, full of possibilities that had seemed unimaginable just 1 year ago. "We are remembered," she whispered, recalling the human signal that had first pierced their isolation. "And now, we will never be forgotten again."